This assumption is the barrier to exit most people face when they want to come out of the broom closet. I wish the simple answer to the video title could be no, but it's more like some or maybe, and it starts with the definition of demon, which, as far as I can tell, Christians like to use without actually understanding it. I mean, the word it derives from only shows up in the New Testament once, and the rest of the time it's a totally different word with a totally different Greek meaning, and... Karate! This topic crosses cultures and delves deep into the eisegetical well of Christians trying to de-Greek and de-Hebrew their theology. I thought the answer would be simple, taking a look at Hebrew words commonly translated as demon and breaking down why they aren't, at least in the modern concept, looking at the Apocrypha, defining Greek daimones, but then I noticed the word daimonon only appears once in the New Testament. The rest of the time, a totally different word related to a totally different concept is used, and I'm not sure if modern Christians either understand the difference or care, especially when they have the habit of reclassifying our gods as these vaguely defined beings. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's look at the root word etymologically and mythologically first. If you've seen my prior videos, you know the drill. Demon is derived from the Latin daemon, which itself comes from the Greek daimon. What is a daimon? Well, it depends on who you ask. According to Walter Burkert in his book Greek Religion, Homer used daimon largely to refer to the supernatural forces that affected men in disastrous ways. Kind of like the fates, but differentiated from moira, which is the word meaning fate. For example, Aphrodite and Zeus are both said to act as daimon forces when interfering with the lives of mortals, and mortals who go mad in the Iliad are said to be acting as daimon as well. So vague, angry, interfering supernatural force. In Hesiod, we get to see the concept redefined. Hesiod's work on the Age of Heroes puts Daimones as individual entities, specifically the spirits of the heroes he wiped out at the end of the age. Link in the iCard above to my Zeus video where I talk a little bit more about that. These beings could be worshipped in the home to directly intercede on matters related to their interests, which many modern Hellenists do to this day. Unlike the gods, however, this worship wasn't considered to be required for the maintenance of virtue. It was more optional. Complicating all of this is, of course, the agathos daimon, which translates to good spirit, which was more like a deity. He takes the form of a household snake, sometimes with a human head, sometimes as a youthless snake-like features, sometimes just a snake. Burkert notes how common snakes were in homes in ancient Greece, and how they were seen as positive forces for ridding home of pests and the like. The agathos daimon later, under Platon, was assigned the role of intermediary between humans and the gods, and also the positive influence on humans besieged by the negative daimones. The colloquial usage of the term stuck around for a long time until Platon happened. Yep, we're back to Platonism and Neoplatonism. Strap in, folks. Platon was dealing with questions of theodicy, as many philosophers did, and came to the conclusions that the gods are unaffected by humans because they are perfect. Which is to say, they don't really love or care about us, nor do they get angry about us. Their blessings perpetually rain down on us, but it's our own pollution that stops us from being able to receive them. To explain this, let me use an analogy. Think about the sun. The sun is shining on the planet at all times because we're spiraling around it in an oval orbit. Sometimes you can't see the rays because of the Earth's spin. Sometimes you can a little, but it's covered in clouds. Sometimes it's raining. Sometimes the moon comes between you and the sun for a little while and eclipses happen. That doesn't mean the sun isn't transferring energy to the planet, just that there are circumstances that prevent us from being able to appreciate that energy. Add an extra layer of sometimes there are droughts, so we get the blessings but we don't want them, or the whole hole in the ozone layer issue we had there for a while, and you get an idea of what Platonists think. The gods are always giving, but replace all those circumstances with personal pollution, lack of knowledge, and improper belief, so it's basically your fault when you can't get what's going on with the sun. Platon thought humans worship the gods for our benefit, and that there are no relationships with the gods, only relations like one would have with a river or lake. So how do blessings happen? This is where daimones come in. Platon expanded on the ideas from Hesiod and decided that the daimones must be intermediaries between the gods and humans, both good and bad. Orkos, which was the concept of oath, became a daimon that punishes people for breaking oaths, etc. His students, Xenophanes and Proclus, expanded these out to include angelos, or divine messengers, and heroes, distinguished from daimones here in that they only beat back the pollution from the mortal world for the gods, because apparently matter is polluting according to Platon. Proclus in particular believed the daimones could only affect the physical body, whereas angelos could affect the body and the mind, and the gods always fed the world and affected body, mind, and spirit, but only when we sought them out and purified ourselves. Platonic and Neoplatonic theology is extremely complicated, and even the depth I've gone into is oversimplified. At some point I might take a crack at it, but suffice to say I disagree with the points about the gods being impersonal. It is from these ideas, particularly Kenocrates, who focused primarily on the negative aspects of Daimones, that we can get a close approximation to what Christians think demons are. We'll get to the projection of demons onto the New Testament a bit later. Wait, you ask, what about the Old Testament? That old Bible in my back closet uses the word there too. Oh, sweet summer child. Eisegesis hits the Old Testament especially hard. In a paper on Dies Welt des Orients called Concepts of Demons in Ancient Israel, Heinrich Fay-Anthes argues that the concept of demons, as we currently understand them, was actually a later Christian projection onto ancient Semitic texts, which was then later adopted by rabbis under the influence of Christianity. Anthes opens the paper by discussing hybrid creature protective amulets used by the ancient Hebrews to ward off unspecified evil forces that cause disease. The authors specifically discuss the Daimonomicon definition of demon here, which are entities that could be summoned by name in a ritual, as defined by medieval scholars who pursued suspected quote-unquote witches for quote-unquote demon worship. He points out that these hybrid figures often have wings, which are connected with the ancient Jewish breath or wind aspect of Yahweh. In other words, these aren't malevolent powers being invoked, but instead protective ones. So, strike one. In the next section, Anthes discusses the Psalms and the personalized or deified words for illness and epidemic, and how they are often mistranslated as demons. In reality, he argues, if we look at the Akkadian prayers at the time, which these are believed to be derived from, what we find is that those prayers asked the gods for help against disease and illness rather than appealing to personified or demonic versions of these concepts to stop harming the supplicant. Strike two. Anthes takes on another word often translated as demon, one that means foreign or dispossessed gods, and strips it down to the Israelite desire to reappropriate the foreign gods to Yahweh. This was actually accomplished by appropriating the names of these ancient gods, but never mentioning their divine characteristics, only using them to describe their domains in relation to Yahweh's rulership. The example given here is the Canaanite deity Resep, which was represented by an insignia of arrows, shield, and a gazelle. The word Resep is only ever used to refer to arrows, lightning, and healing, and never distinguished as an actual entity, thereby transferring the god's power to Yahweh in Israelite eyes. The section also discusses the ancient Israelite habit of denying the foreign god's agency and power by using the word sedim, which just effectively means foreign god. These are confined to passages telling the Israelites not to worship these deities as they have in the past, with no characterization of the gods themselves. The author argues that this word only gains its evil connotation in the Septuagint, or the Koine Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible, and some Apocrypha, which uses the word daimonon as a stand-in for sedim, erroneously, according to Anthes. We'll get into that later. He then delves into the concept of he-goats, or goat demons, from which the image of Satan is said to be derived. These entities, he argues, have a close association with fertility deities from other cultures, and the danger of them is only in their worship by the Israelites, not any kind of malevolent character of the entities themselves. Their worship challenges Yahweh's sovereign rule over Israel, and that's the problem, not the creatures themselves. He also goes into Azazel, who, in ancient purification rituals, receives a sin-laden goat offering so that Yahweh may receive his offerings pure. Azazel is shown in this ritual to be the antithesis of Yahweh, in that he dwells in the desert and that he receives the offerings to relieve Yahweh of needing to. He doesn't have any personal autonomy beyond this function, so not a demon. Strike three. Now we actually get to Satan. I talked a little bit about the concept of the Satan in my latest video on divine inspiration, link in the iCard, but I'd like to expand on it a bit here. In Job and Zechariah, the Satan is shown as the representative of the Hammurabian Code, similar to Gaia in the myth of Gaia and Uranus. The Satan challenges Yahweh to test his follower Job, and in Zechariah acts as accuser, to which Yahweh replies that he will not condemn his nation. He doesn't act autonomously in either case, Anthes argues, but rather under Yahweh's rulership. He also mentions Balaam and the angel acting as Satan, or adversary, under Yahweh's orders. Anthes contrasts this to Satan in 1 Chronicles, who does act autonomously and displaces Yahweh as any source of evil in the world. Taken together, though, he argues these are not a coherent concept of a single entity, but rather an evolution of concepts regarding a title given to Yahweh's servants. This seems to put a damper on the idea of the Old Testament demons. Sorry, medieval witch hunters. In a paper in the Journal of Biblical Literature called When Angels Become become demons? Dale Basil Martin seeks an answer. He opens by arguing the ancient evil spirits in Judaism, discussed in the earlier paper, can't be equivocated to the later concept of demons as fallen angels under satanic rulership directly. It was in fact later Christians equating fallen angels from apocryphal Jewish texts with a term used for demigods or divine intermediaries by the Greeks. It was a deliberate equating done later to further isolate new converts from their old culture. He argues that this first occurs in the translation of the Septuagint with the equating of satyrs and Dionysos with the he-goats of the desert in Isaiah 13. These translators also took 5 or 6 other Hebrew words, again discussed before, to mean daimonon in Greek because the ancient Greeks saw daimons as both lesser gods and concept like fate. In other words, in an attempt to merge two cultures during the Hellenistic period, an equation was born that was never intended by those who originally used these words. He backs this up further with mention that the ancient Hebrew word malak, which refers to Yahweh's angelic messengers, was never translated to daimon. This was to avoid conflating the ancient Greek worship of their gods to the work performed by the servants of Yahweh himself. He argues that daimon could have been taken by the populace to mean any divine being, rather than a specific class as used by Platon and Plutarch, which the translators would have known. In other words, the common folk still agreed with Omer and Hesiod. The translators drew a specific line between the generic Daimones, the foreign divine beings, and their own angelic servants of Yahweh. They then chose the word angelos, which means messenger, to make this distinction. Oh look, angels and demons. The New Testament writers doubtless would have been familiar with these concepts, which is where you get the idea of demons as spirits under satanic rulership in Luke. Here we see that transition taking place, with Hellenized Jews making arguments in favor of their Messiah while further distancing themselves from the sacrificial cults of their non-Jewish neighbors. In Paul's work, the only explicit reference to daimones is in 1 Corinthians 10:19-22, which is an admonishment of Greek worship as not being Yahweh. Avoid it, Paul says, and you'll be fine. The paper concludes that angels and demons were taken as two separate species until the 2nd and 3rd centuries, and only then later by Christian writers attempting to make sense of the idea of angels delivering negative punishments on behalf of Yahweh. The equating of demons with ancient gods was deliberate, used by the ancients in much the same way that Christians use it today, to strip the ancient gods of their power and right to be worshipped by followers, and to elevate their singular deity as the only one befitting of such worship. In other words, Christians and ancient Jewish folks both acknowledged the existence of these other deities, they just really wanted their god to be better, so they manipulated language to make other gods look evil so other people would be less likely to worship them. Yay history! The demonologies that later named and ascribed characteristics to demons emerged from later writers trying to add onto and reclassify these ideas with misinterpretations of apocryphal texts, such as the Book of Enoch and the Testament of Solomon. Which, by the way, that word that I referenced at the beginning, often translated to demon, it's actually pneuma akathorton, or unclean spirit, and refers specifically to ritual pollution, which, although the application differed, both Greeks and Jewish folks at the time believed in some version of. So, these were just spirits attracted to ritual pollution that Jesus and others were said to be able to cast out because they could purify the person without need of a sacrifice or ritual, because look how awesome Jesus is! So, we're back to the question from the beginning. Do pagans worship demons? The answer that I'd give is that the desperation that later Christians felt to reclassify the gods into lower beings in order to stop their followers bleeding into more naturalistic local faiths is evident in the modern trend towards superstition regarding Satan and his supposed cohorts. Christians wanted to show how edgy and different they were, so unlike other ancient cultures, felt the need to deny the divinity of their neighbors' gods, because the only way to make yourself feel awesome is to put other people down, apparently. We worship gods and daimones as the ancient Greeks saw them, and not as later Hellenized Jews and Christians did, and pagans of other pantheons often worship other types of spirits like Landvites from heathenry or Orishas from Voodoo. We worship our gods, and only through mistranslation and misdirection do they become demons. So do Christians think we worship demons? Yes, but it's only because of their insecurity. As far as we're concerned, we worship our gods. Phew, that was a lot. If you're new here and you enjoy this little foray into ancient history, smash the subscribe button and sound the bell to the other worlds so the ancient spirits may awake from your call. Let me know in the comments if this helped illuminate the age-old frustration of deity reclassification, or if I helped you understand a bit why demons always seem silly and absent from the Bible. Thank you as always to GaelicNox for the amazing artwork. Link to their website and Twitter is in the description. And remember, faith ain't fear.